Houston, we have a problem. These infamous words spoken by the Apollo 13 astronauts have become the definition of understating the magnitude of a problem. We've adopted the phrase when we encounter what appears to be an insurmountable situation with no apparent solution. Just as Project Apollo provided us with this term, it also provided us with a model for solving such overwhelming problems and turning them into amazing success stories. These are the lessons from Apollo 13, and in this introduction we will explain how we won the space race and how you can use the same tools not only to solve seemingly impossible problems, but to achieve your loftiest goals. In April 1970, the Apollo 13 mission was launched. It was to be the third lunar landing mission. The press had dubbed it a routine space mission, and the TV networks did not even carry the live TV broadcasts as the astronauts made the journey from the Earth to the Moon. Those of us who worked at NASA never understood how landing on the Moon could ever be considered routine. 2 days and 200,000 miles into the mission, the words "Houston, we have a problem" came across the air-to-ground communications for the first time and became a part of our permanent lexicon.
Houston, we've had a problem here. Can say again, please.
15 seconds later, Lovell repeated the message.
Houston, we've had a problem.
The astronauts had heard a loud bang coming from the command module. A series of caution and warning lights and buzzers went off. Battery voltage indicators dropped dramatically. Outside the spacecraft window, they could see some sort of gas venting into space. The flight controls at Mission Control in Houston were losing data from the spacecraft. All physical indications were that a catastrophic failure had occurred and the astronauts were in imminent danger. The preliminary diagnosis was that one of the tanks that provides oxygen and generates electricity had apparently exploded and the ship was losing power. The photo shows the actual damage that was unknown until just before landing, when they jettisoned the service module and saw that an entire side of the spacecraft had been blown off in the explosion. I'm Tom Taormina. I was on duty at Mission Control in Houston when the explosion occurred. I heard, "Houston, we have a problem," firsthand over the communications console in my office. I was a quality control engineer and had just come on shift. The role of quality assurance was to work on solving any hardware failures that might happen during a mission. The previous 2 lunar missions had been uneventful, and I was looking forward to another evening of making the rounds of the 3 floors of Mission Control, monitoring the activities, and sampling the coffee in the various support rooms. I was a junior in high school when President Kennedy made his famous speech, committing the country to send men to the moon and return them home safely by 1970. He was talking directly to me. There was no doubt in my mind that I was to be part of that journey. So, on my 19th birthday, I packed my car, left the family home in Queens, New York, and drove to Houston. I enrolled in the electrical engineering school at the University of Houston. I got a full-time job in an electronics store and paid my way through college. I bugged enough people until I landed a job as an electronics technician for Philco, the prime contractor that built and staffed Mission Control Center. I worked my way up the ranks, and in 1969 I was invited to become one of the first quality control engineers. This new discipline was to pioneer how we would build quality into the design and components instead of having to inspect for defects after they were made. Over the following decade, I performed quality audits at more than 400 companies that wanted to be qualified to sell products and services to NASA in Houston. My 14 years at NASA provided me with a unique foundation for helping businesses achieve their most aggressive objectives and solve their most challenging problems. Since leaving NASA, I ran several manufacturing companies, worked with more than 700 companies total, both in auditing and consulting roles, and I've written 12 books on risk avoidance and business excellence. I continue to conduct workshops and facilitate business optimization projects in a wide variety of industries, all based on my experience at NASA and in particular the lessons from Apollo 13. At age 70, I only have one thing left on my bucket list, and that is to endow the lessons of winning the space race while finding the answers to just one question. If we can make up our minds to win the space race in 7 years, and if we can land men on the moon and return them home safely, and if we can solve seemingly catastrophic and impossible problems aboard Apollo 13 when it's 200,000 miles in space, then why can't we come together on the most pressing problem of winning the human race? The remainder of this presentation is provided to stimulate your thought processes and start a movement to turn around the mediocrity and lack of purpose rampant in our country today. The story of Apollo 13 is a 6-day odyssey of life-threatening problems being discovered and solved one at a time.
It's a story of icy calm in the face of death.
The odds were very small that we're going to get out of this alive.
Of absolute refusal to admit defeat.
We will never surrender. We will never give up crew.
Of hope against all odds.
I just knew he'd come back.
An ordeal that lasted less than 6 days, but still echoes decades later, every time a spacecraft splits the heavens. And liftoff.
While the Ron Howard movie, Apollo 13, accurately depicts the high drama and heroic actions, the lessons from this successful failure are just as profound and just as applicable to problems of today as they were 45 years ago. The first lesson is that thousands of individuals, representing hundreds of companies and governmental agencies, successfully worked together on a single mission and vision. Next, during the Apollo era, it's my opinion that our country reached its greatest successes in human achievement. Next, there were thousands of technical, medical, scientific, and practical spin-offs from the space program. We would not have technology or medicine at the advanced we currently have if it weren't for the space race. We also created a model for greatness that I call the Apollo business model. It's documented in my 12th book, It Was Rocket Science. Finally, we proved that the most difficult problems could be overcome by working together. Jim Lovell was the commander of Apollo 13. The following segment exemplifies what "Houston, we have a problem" meant to those of us working on Apollo 13.
I listened to that radio transmission that is probably as famous as the flight itself. Those 5 words, "Houston, we've had a problem." And I listened to the calm in your voice. Were you as calm as you sound?
I kind of think so. I mean, I was faced with a problem. And so if I did nothing but, bounce off the walls for 10 minutes, I'd be right back to where that problem was.
I would be right back to where the problem was. How profound, and what a great indicator of what "Houston, we have a problem" meant to those working on Apollo 13.
The culture of this room was literally miraculous. It seemed that whatever happened, we were better as a total team than the sum of the parts.
Gene Kranz was the lead flight controller for Apollo 13. He taught each of us that the mission control team was capable of extraordinary accomplishments under the most challenging conditions. He was the model of leadership that we needed then and we need again today. Apollo 13 was destined to face one life-threatening problem after the next. The story of how they created a carbon dioxide filter out of components available only on the spacecraft is a teachable model for business and civic leaders to follow present day.
The lunar module was only designed to support 2 men for 2 days. Its air purifiers were maxed out. The dead command module was still attached. They could get more filters there, but they were the wrong shape, square, and wouldn't fit the round openings in the LEM.
And of course, it's a big engineering goof that we didn't have the same canister for both sides.
We got to come up with a solution here.
Engineers had to design an adapter, literally make a square peg fit in a round hole. They had to do it quickly, and they could only use what was on the spacecraft. Part of a flight manual, plastic bags, duct tape.
They did a mock-up of it down on the ground in Houston, and then they told you basically how to do it, and you must have thought they were crazy.
Yeah, they said, now take 3 feet of duct tape. And we said, what, 3 feet? They said, yeah, an arm's length of duct tape.
Another profound lesson that we learned was that each process had to function 100% on its own, and that all systems are dependent on each other for ultimate success. In this case, after all the heroic work done to keep the astronauts alive for 6 days, they might still have a damaged heat shield from the explosion, and they could burn up on re-entry. How many processes in your life can you rely on to be 100% reliable?
In our line of business, you only worry about those things that you can do something about.
So all the things you had done for the 4 days prior, all the heroic efforts of everyone would have been for naught had there been a major flaw in that heat shield. It just wouldn't have mattered.
That's right. There's nothing we could do about it. Never could go outside to repair it or anything like that. So we just took it for granted that the heat shield was going to be intact.
Astronaut Jack Lousma was the capsule communicator whose voice you heard talking to the astronauts aboard Apollo 13. He wrote the foreword for my newest book. In the book, he wrote that, over the years, he has constantly asked what they would have done if they could not have figured out a rescue for this crippled spacecraft. His response is, and was, it never crossed my mind. The term failure is not an option has also become part of our American lexicon.
Were you worried at all, Gene, that after all they had been through over those 3 or 4 days, the cold, the sleep deprivation, the tension and the stress, that they may just make a simple mistake, that they simply weren't up to the task of getting home?
No. This is the kind of relationship that we must have with our crew. The crew totally depends upon us to come up with the right answers. We depend upon them to provide the information and to execute. So this
no room for second guessing.
This relationship is absolute. Trust is really the key.
I call this presentation The Lessons from Apollo 13. The learning moments I hope you will take away from this presentation are the following. First, the only way we will, as a society, solve our energy, medical, environmental, and cultural challenges is to commit to another impossible challenge like winning the space race. Next, the legacy of Apollo must be endowed to our children to counteract the complacency and lack of accountability we currently exhibit in our society. Finally, we must adopt the Apollo business model at every level of academia, business, and government infrastructure if we are to avoid becoming a third world nation. Just as President Kennedy wisely said about the space race, we choose to do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. The difficult things we must accomplish today include finding and embracing enlightened leaders whose only mission is the betterment of mankind, sharing their vision with everyone and gaining complete support in accomplishing the missions, becoming critical thinkers who solve difficult problems with cunning, determination, and resolve, planning our future instead of becoming victims of it, ensuring that every task we undertake is completed with 100% reliability and is free from foreseeable risk. Everyone, yes everyone, becoming accountable for their own actions to themselves and to each other. And finally, everyone winning the human race. No winners, no losers, no kings, and no slaves. In closing, it's my fervent belief that the greatest lesson from space is to learn from history and not to repeat it.